and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon-neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you for joining the conversation. In recent weeks, we've been exploring how solar energy generation and the electric grid will evolve over the next decade to help lower society's carbon emissions and environmental impact. The prospect of new solar generation capacity created by placing transparent solar cells on windows and other surfaces suggests that much more of the sun's 174 petawatts of energy that reaches Earth's surface daily can be captured and converted into electricity. To give you a sense of how much power we could get from the sun, the United States annual energy consumption is about 0.25% of the sun's daily energy. How can we harvest more of that energy sustainably and move it to where it's needed? That's the question that we're looking at today. Our guest is Veeral Hardev. He is Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Ubiquitous Energy, a developer of transparent solar technology. Each of its 3x5-foot UE power windows for commercial buildings and homes generates about 200 watt-hours of electricity a day, and it also prevents some of the heating of indoor spaces by sunlight. The company envisions using its thin film technology as cover and a power source for greenhouses and as sources of energy for partially or fully self-powering consumer electronics and vehicles. Of course, we have to figure out how to make photovoltaics sustainably. Ubiquitous Energy says it uses materials that are abundant and can be sourced with minimal environmental impacts. And the pieces of the solar puzzle are starting to fall in place. So let's find out how they fit together today. You can learn more about Ubiquitous Energy at ubiquitous.energy. That's ubiquitous.energy. No .com, no .net, nothing. Ubiquitous.energy. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the show, Veeral. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
Well, hey, thank you for joining us. Ubiquitous Energy's installed some interesting commercial window demonstration projects. Can you tell us about one of these demonstrations and how it changed the building's power and emissions profile?
Yeah, great question, Mitch. So we've installed windows probably in close to about a dozen places, kind of mostly here in the US, but also internationally in Canada and Japan as well. Mm-hmm. I think the one maybe I'll point out is the one that we've done at our headquarter facility here in California. We did that a couple of years ago. And what we actually did was we took a set of windows that was in one of our conference rooms, and we replaced it with our windows. So our windows are traditional double pane window units that have our technology embedded in it, which is, as we've discussed, the transparent solar technology. Mm-hmm. And so the windows looked more or less the same as they did before, but inherently also with our technology is a good thermal insulation or emissivity property, similar to traditionally in the window industry, what is known as low E glass or low E windows. Mm-hmm. So our technology has inherently that same performance. And so just by replacing the existing windows, which are actually just single pane monolithic glass, we immediately, from a personal standpoint, saw an immediate improvement into the temperature control just in that conference room, right, which was obviously a very welcome sign to not only our employees, but also our guests that would actually sit in that conference room. So that's one. The other thing that we did, because it was just a smaller kind of scale installation and demonstration, not the whole building or anything, but mm-hmm. just a single room, fairly large room, conference room, we actually connected the windows to a battery system. And that battery system is actually powering all of the overhead lighting that's in that room. And okay. So now that room is not relying electrically on, the building's electricity, inherent grid, if you will, utility to power the lights. And so by having our windows there, we're actually able to offset, some small amount of energy load because the building doesn't need to power those lights anymore.
That's interesting to think of the building itself as a modular grid.
Yes.
So as we expand our implementation of this kind of technology, you can take care of small local power requirements and ultimately build out maybe something completely self-sufficient.
That's exactly right, Mitch. I mean, we're really big believers in kind of what we call distributed energy resources. Mm-hmm. So really kind of advancing as the kind of our grid, just as technologies are advancing. So with technologies like ours, we really believe in this idea of kind of local kind of generation and consumption of electricity. We don't really need to wire and route everything so far. And hopefully this is also going to make us more resilient in terms of the grid itself, right? Just from all of these, as everybody knows, all of these natural events that are occurring more frequently now, and avoiding things like blackouts where you really rely on the grid. I mean, could probably go into a whole conversation on kind of grid
and we will in a moment.
How that goes, right? But to us, it's really fascinating because, the grid probably, as you know, was built around fossil fuel technology. And so now with all these renewable energy technologies coming on, it doesn't really work, right, as well.
Well, so like a lot of solar companies, Ubiquitous Energy is building on a long history of invention and innovation. Where was your technology invented, and how did that lead to the launch of the company?
Yeah, great question. Great question about the genesis of the company. So our co-founders were actually at MIT about 12 years ago, and they were researching ways, just solar technology in general. And they kind of came across this concept of what we call like spectrum engineering or selective harvesting of light. And they said, well, instead of doing what everybody else is trying to do around the world, trying to make solar more efficient, make it lightweight or flexible, they said, well, what if we made it so that it didn't look like it looks? What if we made it so that it was more or less invisible or transparent? And that was kind of the genesis of the concept of the technology that's behind the company. And really what they developed then was feasibility, and proved out that you could actually make a solar device that's still functional, generating electricity from sunlight, but it's actually visibly transparent. Like you can't even see it. And that's really the goal for us from a company and vision standpoint, is to create a technology similar to and I don't know if the viewers will be able to see or listen to this, but if you look at this image behind me, this is an installation we did with one of our partners in Canada. The windows here on where I'm pointing to on the right side are the traditional windows, and our windows are here. So you can see they more or less look exactly the same. And that's really what the goal is for us.
So your technology is integrated into the window glass. It's not a film that's laid on it in the normal sense, where a plastic film or plastic-like film. How does a clear surface capture and turn light into electricity? That selective harvesting of solar energy we're talking about.
Yeah, great question. So it's kind of in between what you're saying, Mitch. So what we've developed is it's a coating. So it's a coating that we're applying to the surface of the glass. So our coating is covering the entire surface. And what it's doing is it's working just like a traditional solar panel, where a traditional solar panel sees sunlight, absorbs some of that sunlight, and converts it into useful electricity as much as possible, right? And that's what traditional solar does. We're doing the same thing. It's just that all of our materials in our solar device, our coating, are transparent. So all the layers are transparent. And so it's seeing some of that sunlight. The unique thing is it's only utilizing the non-visible part of the light spectrum. So the light energy that comes from sun that we cannot see. And that's mostly in the ultraviolet and infrared. And we're letting pass through or transmit all of that visible light, what we see with our human eyes, color. And so visually to us, our technology, the coating on the window, looks just like a traditional window. It looks like there's nothing there, but it's actually utilizing that non-visible light energy and creating renewable energy out of that.
And how is a window integrated into the building's electrical systems? That's the other interesting question to me. Is it's not just like setting a normal framed window in there. It has to be connected to something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And going back to that discussion, the brief discussion we had about the distributed energy kind of resources, right? Now we can consider the window as a window that's a power source. And so some of the applications we're looking at is, what could you do with power if you had it at the window? Could you power features like, automation of closing and opening of a window, mechanical venting? Could you power automated shade coverings or blinds, right? Or window coverings? Could you do things like enhance security features, like have cameras, motion detection, all of that sensing right at the window without having to connect to anything? And that's something we're working on, especially in the residential market with one of our partners, Anderson Window, to develop products like that specifically for the residential market. I think the question you're getting to is more on the commercial side, where you have a big commercial building and now you have all these windows, you need wiring.
Well, in
And
any context, I mean, I can imagine that kind of self-sustained or self-sufficient window that doing monitoring of with a camera, for instance.
yeah,
But on the other hand, or in a commercial building, it powering maybe the lights in the room, as you described.
mhm.
But this means we have to rethink what a window is.
That's exactly right, Mitch. That's exactly right. I mean, we really want to take the window surface and make it something that just historically it's never been. The purpose of a window is really just to see in and out and have an environmental barrier, right? And so why not have it do something more? Why not turn something that's so much surface around us in the built environment, especially that's passive, not doing anything other than that visual for us, but turn it into something that's dynamic and actually creating value for us. And, going back to the wiring, it's something that we're seeing, quite honestly, quite a bit of, especially for development, new construction development, where we talk about it as the electrification of the facade, of the building's facade. And so this is something that we know, talking to a lot of systems companies, building systems integrators, this is already in the mindset of designers, architects, and developers now for new construction. Now we're starting to figure out ways, how can you do this with existing buildings, right? Because to integrate our technology into an existing building can be quite a challenge, right? I mean, historically, well, now what do you do with the wiring? There's other technologies that are on the market that are doing things that are kind of almost, I would say, in the opposite of what we're doing. We're generating energy. We need that energy to go somewhere. These other technologies exist where they have these features that are in the window that, do like tinting or changing of the glass that require power.
Right.
So these technologies to kind of figure out how do you integrate and electrify essentially, again, the facade are already coming into play. And so these are things that, we're just going to hopefully pick up on, once we commercialize our technology in a couple of years and get to the market.
So do these windows need to be installed like we traditionally think of a photovoltaic panel facing south, or can they generate energy from any ambient light from any direction?
Yeah, definitely the any direction, right? Obviously, here in the northern hemisphere, facing south and mostly west, depending on the exact geographical location, is going to be your best in terms of overall solar exposure. And that's really what most solar technologies need, right? Maximize solar exposure, maximizes your power output. Our technology is similar in that more sun, more power output. There's that correlation. I think where it's also unique in that it's similar more to other thin film solar technologies in that it literally still operates with indirect exposure. So you don't need sun directly shining on the window for it to generate. It performs very well in what we call off-angle or diffuse ambient light, which is really important when you think about the built environment, where again, when you have buildings where you have shading, all these kind of things, all these different environmental factors at play, you don't really always get a good snapshot or direct exposure to direct sunlight. And so that's something that's a little bit unique for our technology, but again, similar to other types of advanced solar technologies as well.
And what kind of materials do you use? We're familiar with silicon, cadmium telluride. What are you using, and does it require a lot of mining of critical minerals, for instance, to begin to produce this at scale?
Yeah, definitely. The short answer is no. It does not require mining. There's no exotic materials. It's really important for us from a sustainability perspective, because that's kind of the business we're in with renewable energy, that everything we do is sustainable, including all of our key materials, our raw materials, and that forms our kind of transparent solar coating device. And
so where do you source them? Where do you source them?
Yeah, so these are materials that are based off, what I would describe as something that are commodity carbon-based materials. So these are materials that are inexpensive, found globally around the world, things that are used as the building blocks for things like organic dyes for clothing and blue jeans and things like this. So really inexpensive, nothing hazardous, toxic, rare earth about them, doesn't require mining. What we do is we take those materials and we apply some chemistry to them. So we actually change their properties at the molecular level so that we can actually create them into a coating that is actually a solar device. So we built up these materials in different layers to create our own solar device. And so what's important for us, obviously, is that all those materials are transparent when we make them into a coating, and that they actually play a role in functioning in some part in that overall solar device. And so that's where a lot of our key technology core competency is as a company and a technology. And for the market, what it means is we use materials that are available. There's we can source them, we can manufacture them easily, scale them up easily. We don't require that much material because it is a very thin coating that we're applying to the glass. The thickness is about 1 micron, so about 100 times almost smaller than the thickness of a human hair, which is around 80 to 100 microns. So it's very, very thin. Doesn't add weight to the glass, and gives us all these benefits that we've been talking about.
Now, you mentioned the goal of being sustainable. Have you established your emissions goals, your water use goals, and so forth? And are you going to publish that? And how are you doing on the goals if you've got them?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that we are definitely putting plans in place for now. We don't have our production facility kind of broken ground on yet, but that's something that we're planning to do at our production facility for sure. Trying to make that a very sustainable and as kind of environmentally conscious from all aspects, including supply of raw materials, incoming, how we operate, how we fabricate, how we process, to outgoing product, leaving the shipping dock. And so it's not something that we're tracking or monitoring now because we don't have that production facility. Of course, we have an R&D facility and a pilot facility here in California,
right?
But it's not something specifically that we're looking at in terms of because we don't own the building.
So you expect to do this in conjunction with the announcement of commercial availability at scale?
Yes, definitely. It'll be something again that we do more of at our production facility, I believe. It's something that is important to potential customers and developers of not so much on the water use aspect, but the impact that our technology can have on their buildings and how it improves their buildings from quality, certifications, tenant kind of relationships, and then obviously energy impact.
Well, and you become their scope 3 or part of their scope 3 emissions, but you're showing the reduction. So there's actually something trackable and a benefit to the customer as well as to you.
Definitely, yeah. And there's all kinds of, as we've seen from some consulting firms like McKinsey and Bain, who put out a number of studies that have shown what happens just to the value from a developer side, but also to the tenant side for buildings that are, more green or more certified as being more environmentally eco-conscious. There's benefits across the board, which are now people are starting to turn those into financial valuations or metrics, which now people are realizing how much some of these soft and non-quantitative things previously have actually a big impact and big role.
Well, it's amazing how when you start counting things, value emerges.
Yeah, that's right.
Take a commercial break here. We'll be right back. Let's return to the discussion with Ubiquitous Energy's Vice President of Corporate Strategy, Veeral Hardev. So, Veeral, you've launched a partnership with Andersen Windows. You mentioned that it was announced last year. What are you developing together, and how's that project progressed toward wider commercial availability?
Yeah, it's great. We're kind of over the moon thrilled to be working with a company like Andersen Window. They just their brand reputation and their place in the marketplace, we think brings instant credibility to what we're doing. And so we've been working with them, as you mentioned, a little bit over a year now to jointly develop a product specifically for the residential window market and light commercial market. And so can't get into the details of exactly what that's going to be. It's an ongoing development, but it's going to be more or less some of the things we kind of discussed earlier. A window that's more or less self-sufficient, can power things, can automate things. So it's going to be something along those lines. We're jointly developing that. We expect to launch product once have our first factory. So in a couple of years, call it roughly 2.5, 3 years or so. And so it's going really well. We've done a lot of collaboration with them. We're actually doing a project right now, which they've talked about a little bit publicly where we've installed some of our windows at their facility in Minnesota, and we're doing a lot of kind of metrology and evaluation of that installation to inform our development to have commercial products for the residential and light commercial market. So we're super thrilled to be working with them, and really look forward to some of the great things and ideas I think the team has been developing, and it's starting to realize now.
Your site paints a really compelling picture of the idea of appliances and vehicles getting some of their energy from light. What kinds of products could be powered with ubiquitous energy films?
Yeah, so we think kind of endless, right?
Could I do it on my blender based on?
You could code our technology on your blender in the future for sure.
Okay.
I think honestly speaking, any surface that actually sees some exposure to sunlight, we believe is a good application for us, especially if you want to maintain the kind of traditional or current aesthetic of that surface. So blender might not be the best thing because you can have a black blender, you can have an opaque blender, right? But when we think about expanding beyond Windows, I think the value and the application for Windows is fairly straightforward for us.
Sure.
And the impact it can have globally. So, Windows not only for homes, buildings, universities, airports, right? Anywhere you have windows and you have glass.
So could a windshield on a car, for instance, be part of the power source for the EV?
Exactly, Mitch. And that's exactly where I was going. So anywhere you have technically a window or a glass surface, like for cars, like for EVs or autonomous vehicles, trucking, cruise ships, freight, cargo, right? Any of those places are really a good application, and all have their kind of unique values that you'll be able to get. And then if you expand beyond that and you kind of look just broadly, there's things like farming, sustainable farming, greenhouses. So having greenhouses that are kind of independently, kind of their own, going back to the grid.
Yeah, that was a really interesting idea. The idea of just the film on the greenhouse powering the greenhouse.
Exactly right. And so now you could put a greenhouse literally anywhere in the world. It could be as rural or as remote as you need. You don't need it to be technically connected to an actual grid anymore, right? And so this idea of kind of off-grid structures also is an interesting one. But even things just simply as consumer electronic devices, your phone, right? So we could cover that display of that phone without affecting the quality of the display.
Right.
You're outside for 20 minutes a day, get some exposure, and you're going to get enough kind of we call trickle charging to that device, so that you might not ever need to physically plug in that device ever again. So imagine all those people who are around at airports, all huddled around the kind of, the outlets and things like that. If you're just sitting by the window in an airport, you just put your phone out and you can get off an emergency call or a text or something that if you're running out of power.
Well, but that also raises a lot of interesting questions about battery management and battery design, because you no longer are thinking in terms of this large single charge, but a lot of trickle charging.
That's right.
What's the path to market for those kinds of applications? Do you need to establish R&D partnerships with consumer electronics and auto manufacturers?
Probably yes. I mean, it's not going to be in our core business to go out and create these applications and go to market with them themselves, especially even when we look at the window application itself. Our goal is not to be Ubiquitous Energy, the window company. Our goal is to be Ubiquitous Energy, the technology company, and an enabler to help our partners have more value-added products and bring value to their customers. And so when we look at that kind of philosophy and that business model, we think it naturally extends to all of these other applications, because we're not the consumer electronic company expert. We're not the automotive glass or automotive EV expert. Why don't we work with those companies to see how our technology can improve their offerings? And so it's mutually beneficial, not only for us, but also for our partners and then customers.
I can't wait to get a scratch protector for my phone that also charges it.
Definitely, yeah. Those are, it's interesting because I came from a company previously that was in the consumer electronics space, right? We were in the display application space, and so all of these different applications and markets are so unique and so different from each other. But what I really like, what's interesting about our technology, and not to use a bad pun here, we really believe it's going to be ubiquitous. We really believe that this technology can be everywhere and provide value for all of these different markets and applications.
I hear echoes of a naming conversation there, but well, look, the home and the office, they're clearly going to become more digital and self-powering. But this begs the question. It's not the right usage, but it requires we ask about the shape and structure of our national grid. Are we really beginning to evolve our thinking about energy distribution and generation and collection in order to take full advantage of where we are going? And if not, what can we do to accelerate the progress?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mitch. I mean, I think there's a lot of great things happening in terms of what I consider more about, which is what the grid is intended to do, is just energy distribution and kind of just management, right, of energy generation and distribution, right? So now, since hopefully we're moving more and more towards renewable energy sources versus coal and fossil fuel, there's ample opportunity for kind of this idea of distributed energy, right? And so you have local independent kind of power generators, right? Your building could be its own power generator now, using technologies like ours. I think one of the challenges has been now, is there enough storage out there? Because, during the day for all solar technology, there's an ambient amount of sunlight. You're able to generate as much as you can. But if you're not able to effectively store that power so that it can be used later, we're kind of almost doing a disservice. And so in California, it's been there's been this kind of famous phenomenon called the duck curve. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, where in terms of energy pricing and sunlight exposure, where during the utility companies want you to consume energy during the day now because there's so much ambient and ample energy that's generated from solar. And then at night, and that's this whole evolution of this dynamic pricing, right? And so now it's more expensive to use energy at the times of the day where there's not as much generation happening because there's not enough storage out there. So I really think this is a conversation that goes around generation, but also storage. And then this idea of this kind of growing kind of concept, which I really am a big fan of, these virtual power plants, of just how you manage all of these things very efficiently and effectively. And so that's something I know the Department of Energy, for example, the U.S. Department of Energy is investing quite a bit in. Companies like AutoGrid, which was purchased by, I believe it was Siemens about a year or so ago, kind of spearheaded this idea of this virtual power plant. And so those things, I think it's going to take all of these things kind of working together in unison, and frankly, just an advancement of technology. There's not enough battery storage technology out there to be able to take everything that we're able to do right now.
So thinking about the economics of the grid is really interesting. And there's several questions that come from this, but I'll go one at a time.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the really big choke point at the grid level right now is long-haul transmission, moving the power in large quantities to where it's needed, because the edges are starting to take care of local issues.
That's right.
Is that a choke point where potentially there could be exploitative pricing?
That's a great question. I have my personal opinions on that, right? So especially when we look at here where we are in California, the major utility company, Pacific Gas and Electric, has been in the news
many times.
Good news is what I would say, in a bad way, right? All of these events, again, this goes back to all these natural disasters that happen. When you have these long-range transmission lines, how can they economically keep all of these things and maintain them and not have hazards? And so when you have things like wildfires and all this stuff happening, those lines go down. I mean, that's a big loss. I mean, people are out of power for quite some time, right? And it's very expensive to maintain those things. And so I'm not sure what the answer is here, but I believe there is something that is going to occur to kind of update and, basically, to me, take something, an infrastructure that was, from basically the 1900s. Yeah. And now we are in, the 2200s. And so, or going to the 2200s, right? And so when you look at, and I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but when you look at more developing nations,
Mhm.
They're not setting up their grid like we set up our grid. There's no reason for them to do that, right? It's very expensive for us to go back and change that grid now. But for developing nations, they can kind of almost like leapfrog that one generation
Yeah, there's a
of energy
parallel. There's a
distribution.
parallel in the way that the telecommunications infrastructure evolved here and then in emerging economies. They don't have a
Exactly.
physical transmission system. They have a completely wireless one.
That's right.
But so now thinking about the role of the utility, which is, we sell you power, is going to be different. Are they ready to be the managers of power, which also involves a much higher degree of customer service than they are accustomed to?
Yes, I think this is to me, it's pretty straightforward, but I know it's pretty controversial. What is the utility's role going to be going
Mhm.
forward, right? Is to be that manager. I think if they are not careful, I think they will start to get disrupted to some degree. Now, there's a lot of factors at play, including political, as well as just inherent and entrenched kind of legislation that enables utility companies to be what they are, right?
Yeah.
But I believe there's going to have to be some kind of advancement of that business model, of that philosophy, and change, especially in the future when it's 100% renewable.
So if I were a utility and I came to you and said, what should we do? Where can we add value in this market? What would you tell me?
You know, I would first start with education and awareness,
Mhm.
because for us that's actually a really big focus for us is just education and awareness of not only ourselves and our technology that this exists, but then
Mhm.
also to start explaining to people that things like this are out there,
Yeah.
and how can we better utilize them? How can we have more people talking about them? How can we have these interactions to make things better? More, we have that again, that partnership mentality. So we want to
Mhm.
be partners not only with our partners, but with our customers and their customers. And so I think education and awareness is really critical, especially when you have so many new ideas coming to the forefront now, kind of huge dramatic changes that are going to start to happen over the next 10, 15, even 20
Yeah.
years that are already starting to happen, right? And so the management of these things and how it's going to evolve, I think it has to start with this education and awareness. Otherwise it's just not going to happen. So even talking to utility companies and making them aware that, hey, we have a technology like this, and how can we best work together?
Yeah.
And so we almost, I've had some conversations with some of the utility companies here in California, and they asked me the question, how can we work together? And I said, well, let me explain to you what our technology is, what we're doing, and how we see ourselves going to the market. How can we help you? How can we help you to have better offering for what your business is and how you deal with your customers, value you provide to your customers? And so I almost like to flip that question back to them. And I haven't gotten a good answer yet. So we're still working on it.
Well, but that also could be the mechanism through which we really electrify everything. The
Yes.
utilities could, through their financial and financing capabilities,
Yes.
potentially help all of us move forward. But as you're talking, the way that I describe the transition we're going through is we're going from sustainably naive to sustainably native, as we went from
Mm,
digitally naive to native
I
over
like
the
that.
last
Yeah.
20 years. And so you first have to get all the information out there, to your point about education.
Yeah.
But then you get these incredibly disruptive things that happen once everybody's starting to take sustainability for granted. And the current analogy is ChatGPT or
Yeah.
generative AI. Now that we are past the how do computers work, we're actually seeing really truly transformational moments. And sometimes they're incredibly surprising, like what has happened with generative AI
Yes.
over the past month and a half.
Yeah.
And and so what do you think some of the early emanations of distributed power might look like? What might we be surprised by?
I think I mean, to me, I, I look at something that's not super like Jetsony, like
Mhm.
Jetson style, but something that's a little bit more, I think, tangible to me. And to me, that's everything is. You could almost do anything off of your phone now, right?
Yeah.
Even with ChatGPT, right? Like you could write an essay using ChatGPT right off the fingertips from your phone, which is a supercomputer, right?
Mhm.
So I think what people are going to be surprised by and maybe some people are not, is just the amount of informational power that you're going to have at your fingertips. And as it now relates to
because it's powered remotely.
Yeah, because everything is now powered remotely, and how it relates to your energy use and consumption. And I think that's something, again, I think we're still early in this education and awareness phase. Most people don't even understand how electricity works, what a watt is, what a kilowatt hour is. And so now with companies like Tesla and others, you're able to see from your app, right? Hey, this is how much my solar panels are producing. And I think there's this phenomenon that's becoming where people like interacting with that. And now it's almost like a game now where it's like
a sense of control.
It's a control, right? Because now, even if you're not home, you can see, hey, I'm using this much electricity. Well, maybe I can actually remotely shut off my TV or disconnect or unplug it, or I could, run the dishwasher maybe at midnight, remotely. All of these things that are happening. And now coupled with that, you're actually able to see and can maybe even control how much power is actually being used and what's going to which appliance. And then on the vice versa side, how much you're generating. So all of this information is available there now. And hopefully with more information, it makes you more efficient and more effective in using that information, or the corollary here is energy. But that's not always the case. So I think we're in this place where, it could actually start veering towards something that becomes not as effective, if that makes sense.
Well, but the process of becoming more efficient, the optimization of our use of technology is always a kind of a bumpy road. So the important thing is that we all understand the choices we're making. And this conversation has been really helpful. Thank you so much. How can folks keep track of what Ubiquitous Energy is doing?
Yeah, of course. You can definitely visit our website, just spelled our full company name, ubiquitous.energy. Even if you Google search it, I think our website has a ton of great information. There'll be more coming, videos, articles. We're going to start showing more what we call resources, more actual technical information as well, as we're starting to get closer and closer to having commercial product available. And there's number of videos out there in the world as well, YouTube and others that have some of our content as well.
Well, Veeral, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much, Mitch. It was a pleasure.
We've been speaking with Veeral Hardev. He is the Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Ubiquitous Energy, and you can learn more about them at ubiquitous.energy. That's ubiquitous.energy, no .com at the end, ubiquitous.energy. This conversation and our recent interviews with Toledo Solar's Aaron Bates and Tim Lewin at Georgia Tech's Strategic Energy Institute point to a radical transformation in our relationship with energy. And Veeral's descriptions of the changing nature of a window makes clear that it's not just the delivery mechanism for electricity that's going to change, but the economics and value propositions of energy management that are going to reshape our built environment, the utilities industry, and state and federal policy. There are a lot of changes ahead. Your choices will be changing in a world where a building can be a self-sustaining power grid, with each room migrating to self-powered operation over time. That's a real estate management challenge in an office building, and at home, it's going to be a series of complicated but potentially very sustainable decisions. And when the window becomes a connected appliance, such as with security cameras or auto tinting capabilities built in, who's going to service those appliances? Will it be the utilities, the manufacturers, or a new layer of the service economy, the equivalent of an energy plumber that we will hire to bring in to work with our smart devices and our smart energy generating windows? It's going to be a long and exciting and sometimes frightening evolution, so stay tuned for more coverage. Would you take a moment to share this podcast or any of the more than 390 other interviews we've produced on sustainability in your ear? I would deeply appreciate it if you would take a moment to write a review on your favorite podcast platform. That'll help your neighbors find us. And you folks, you are the amplifiers that spread more ideas so we can create less waste. Please tell your friends, family, and coworkers they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or their other favorite podcast source. Thanks so much for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.